I'm very happy to open the third professional session that relate to issues of sustainability, SDGs, and climate issues. Together with my opening remarks, we will have another two presenters in this session. The first one is Professor Alon Tal, that he is an expert in climate issues, serving as a professor both in Stanford and Tel Aviv universities and other distinguished universities all over the world. And we have also the honor to have with us Mr. Lee Genua, the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, which I was very happy to meet him in the UN building few months ago, and I shared with him our vision, EUROSAI, about the role of state auditors in auditing issues of sustainability, SDGs, and climate issues. Before entering into my presentation, I would like to mention the huge risks that we on Earth are facing due to climate issues. And I will just quote few key figures. One of them relates to the number of disasters, the reported disaster, natural disasters in the world from 1970 to 2019. We faced over 11,000 disasters in the world in related issues such as extreme heat waves, floods, storms, and wind fires. Also, I would mention that due to other figures, 38% of natural disaster-related damage in the world from those 50 years, from 1917 to 2019, resulted from tropical cyclones. And the number of people that were killed in those natural disasters are estimated at a number of 2.07 million people. And the damage, the economic damage, is estimated at $3.6 trillion. So we are facing a major risk that we, as state auditor, should be involved and should carry our audit programs due to those risks, taking into consideration those risks into our audit programs. I would mention also that many EUROSAI members are involved in climate change audits, and of course, the president of EUROSAI, SAI Brazil, which we have the honor to have with us, one of the distinguished members of the leaders of SAI Brazil, Mr. Bruno Dantas, is promoting all over EUROSAI the issue of sustainability, the climate scanner, and other those related issues. I would like to demonstrate in the next slide how we in the State Audit Office Institute in Israel are developing our audit report in accordance with the SDGs. You can see here in this slide the 17 SDGs announced by the UN and adopted by state auditors all over the world. And I tried to demonstrate how during, especially the last year, we conducted audits in those very wide, different areas. So, for example, in the issue of no poverty, SDG 1, we have conducted an audit related to the cost of living. Or if I go to issues of good health, we have looked about specialized medical services. Or if I go to issue of gender equality, we have published a report regarding gender diversity in local governments. How it is promoted, what are the laws, are they imposed, and also we looked at both levels of employees, but also at the levels of the elected people. How many women are involved in leading those local governments, and what are the barriers they are facing? Or if I look at issues of reducing pollution, we looked about reducing pollution from vehicles, and also the transition to electrical vehicles, which I believe we face as state auditors in all our countries. I would also mention the joint audit that we leaded within EUROSAI about the preparedness of our governments to the workforce 2030, the needed skills of the workforce within our countries, which was already published in 2021. I can mention also the issue of looking into public services to people with disabilities. And I would mention not only the report related to local governments and the way that they are giving services to persons with disability, but also a report that we have published about the accessibility of all websites of governments, ministries in Israel for people with disabilities. The leading report, which I will present later on, is focusing about the preparedness to the climate change, and in our case, the national climate action by the government. And last but not least, I would mention two other reports. One of them under SDG 16, dealing with the issue of protection of minors, of children and youth on the online space, because we know that our children are on the online for many hours a day. It can reach 4, 5, 6 hours a day. Are they protected over there? Are they educated by the education system how to protect themselves? Does the education system has a program? Once something like this happens, we know that our children and youth are exposed to not only criminal action online, but also to boycotts or other misuse of online materials, such as, I can just give you an example, to share a picture of your girlfriend or your boyfriend with somebody else without receiving his approval. So yes, in those areas, we have conducted a very comprehensive report looking at especially focusing on children and youth and being their representative. And the last one I will mention is, of course, the joint international audit that now we are leading within EUROSAI related to the implementation of AI. And I would like to take all the colleagues from EUROSAI that are participating in this joint international audit. So you can see here how I demonstrate, or that's the reason of this demonstration, to share with you how we should split our audit plans and audit subjects that will relate to the different SDGs, and in a way will try to pick up the most risky areas that we as auditors and independent size should focus on them. And if I would like to go to the second stage, upon deciding how to pick the relevant subject, I would mention the formation of an office methodology based on inter-size ways on conducting audits from the SDG perspectives, which here I share with you the chart, both about two implementation of the SDGs audit. One of them is the audit for SDG implementation by the auditees, by the public sectors, and SDG preparedness audit that we have also conducted. So here you can see the implementation of the methodology by based on EUROSAI recommendation. If I go to see an international overview, and you can see here many of the effects of climate issues, and it can be related to issues of floods or sea level rise or tourist impact, or even I would mention also the issues of wildfires. Los Angeles just suffered from a huge fire that impacted damages of billions of dollars and tens of thousands of houses that were eventually harmed by this fire. And I believe in all of our countries, each country was already suffered from the effects of climate issues. It can be in very diversified areas that are demonstrated in this slide. And I think also what is very important for us is to share the data, to share the international data on both greenhouse gas emissions and sea level rise in order to enable us to focus in each country about the issue that is relevant and is more risky for us in each one of our countries. And here you can see the map of the world with areas that might suffer from sea level rise, but I believe that we can share and we should analyze international data that relates also to other risks that are affected by climate change. It also should be mentioned that we should use the UN data related also to the disaster impacts. And you can see here some relevant figures about the numbers of reported disasters and the changes between, if we go back 40 years ago or even 45 years ago, what happened during the first 2 decades between 1980 to 1999, and then similar large growth at those figures during 2000 and 2019. You can see here, if I only demonstrate it by the economic losses, you can see that it doubled itself to a level of about $3 trillion, which is almost double than the figures if we go back 20 years previously. And of course, this emphasized the issue of the climate change effect. Some other very important international data is the difference between the losses and the insured damage. And it also demonstrates here the risks, and you can just, if I can just present it in 2017 or 2018, you can see here how the gap is almost $200 billion between the overall losses and the insured ones. And I also can assure you that as part of our audits that we executed in Israel, we found out that in many cases those days we have even difficulties for several government companies even to insure themselves due to the high risks in those areas. But this also demonstrates the risks that are involved in climate change. Some other, of course, international overviews can focus us on health impact, on net zero initiatives, public transparency, forest fires, and other areas that I believe that we as SAIs are dealing a lot with them. If I would like, and if you, I would like also to share with you some of our findings related to a special report that we have conducted in October 2021, and then we went back as in a follow-up audit report in March 2024 regarding our national climate action by the government of Israel. The audit structure was composed of 4 parts. The first one was checking issues related to adaptation, then to mitigation, then to governance and institutions, and then to economic and finance issues, which I will explore later on. I can share with you that as part of EUROSAI initiatives, we had a side event in COP 26, if I'm correct, with colleagues, other colleagues from EUROSAI in Glasgow, presenting our audit related to climate change. And I encourage you all, I think we should, as state auditors, to be involved in worldwide initiatives that relates to climate change and to present our work over there for the benefits of our peoples. I will now skip on the video that we produced regarding the main findings of this report in March 2024, but we will share it with you lately, and I will share some of the findings and, of course, recommendations from those reports. But first, I would mention that the added values of state audits in assessing government climate change. First of all, of course, we are external and independent. Then we have the ability to do this as a continuous effort. As I demonstrated, we have done one report in 2021. We came back in 2024. We are aiming to go back to it in 2026 to continuously assess the strengths, but also the weaknesses of our public sector in order to recommend them to act in a better way. Also, we as state auditors are including in our reports a well-informed, documented report, of course, and I would also mention the issue of course, transparency to the public, but also our ability to execute an integrated assessment when we are not just focusing on one ministry, agency, or one issue, rather than looking into many government related bodies that are affected or are dealing with climate change and assessing their activities in order to improve it for our citizens. Some of the key findings here you can see, for example, in follow-up audit report that relates to Israel, we have measured eventually the targets, what are the targets of our government, and what are the achievements. So here you can see some of the status meeting of GHG emissions. In this case, we looked about the targets of the government and how it relates to eventually the figures if we go business as usual. And you can see here that unfortunately the targets are going down, and I can share with you that this report affected our government in order to encourage them to make our targets much higher and much in comparison to other countries, especially in OECD and in Europe. On the other key findings also related to the budget usage. So we have analyzed the amounts that was designated in government decision. We found out that altogether the government decided about 5.2 billion, in our case shekel, which is about 1.3 billion euros all over the relevant time framework of the audit. But the actual allocation was even much lower, and the actual utilization was even much lower, and we could have demonstrated that only 25% of the total budget declared eventually was utilized to issues of climate change. Before entering to this, I can share with you that as part of the budget utilization, we compared it also to the figures that the government has spent on subsidizing fuel. And it turned out that, and we know many European countries subsidized, especially during the prices that went up in the last few years due to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and the Russian-Ukrainian war, where we know that energy prices went up all over Europe. So governments sometimes subsidize the fuel and subsidize energy resources. In our case, during the same years when the government has spent 1 billion shekels, or I would say about 2.5 billion euros on climate change issues, at the same time, they spent 33 times more on subsidizing fuel and subsidizing energy resources that are not clean energy resources in Israel. So we have also we have demonstrated this as part of our report, using those two figures in order to let the people know about the importance and eventually the difference between the budgeted amount used to climate change issue rather to other priorities of the government, which are more short-term priorities rather than long-term priorities. So it eventually, as my UK colleague many times says, don't, as an auditor, don't say you have to spend more money. Let's find out how we spend it, the public funds, in a wiser way, in a better way, not just recommending on spending more money on an issue. Some barriers that were behind the findings were related to conflict between public targets and considerations of other government ministries, some lack of designs, professional personnel, no sufficient national prioritization, or no framework for budgeting and funding for a long-term integrative perspective. So we didn't only stayed as auditors at looking and finding the gaps, we also tried to analyze what are the reasons, what are the gaps that should be overcome in order the government will deal with climate change in a better way. The key recommendations were setting and achieving targets for reducing GHG emissions, establishing, for example, in our case, a computation centers, and development of an operational framework for long-term budgeting of climate policy. I can share with you that those recommendations were adopted by the government, and we see the fruits of our audits as part of the ongoing process that we are going to make another follow-up report on those issues. You can see some of the effectiveness, as I mentioned before, in both raising the issue, but also dealing with the gaps and finding solutions and raising recommendation how to overcome those kind of gaps. And here you can see the impact of the audit report, both by the Minister for Environmental Protections, but also, for example, there was an impact on the capital market insurance and savings authorities, or the security authorities, or even the Bank of Israel, the central bank, that they were more focusing on risks that are climate related and enforcing them on many, as regulatory bodies, on many of the business entities in Israel. But I will also share with you another example related to our central bank. As part of our report, we have looked about how our central bank is running its funds, because we have our foreign exchange reserves that are totaling over 200 billion euros. It's maybe the highest fund that is being run by any public entity in Israel. And we asked the central bank, that was audited by us, not only how you act as a regulatory body towards the commercial banks, but also, do you implement ESG policy when you run this fund and this portfolio for the benefits of all the citizens of Israel? And eventually they were not adopting such, they didn't have such a ESG policy, and due to our report, they decided to adopt it as part of their of the policy when they are running this very huge fund as our foreign exchange reserve. We were also looking at prioritization and integrating emerging risks stemming from climate change into national emergency scenarios, and of course the issue of promoting carbon tax, like Europe is already having, and due to our report, it was also imposed in Israel. So I would like to thank you very much, and I tried to share with you our experience, the effect of the climate change report on our government bodies, and I believe that we as state auditors, we do have the duty to look about all of those risks and to take it into consideration when we decide on our audit plans and when we execute our audits for the benefits of our people. Thank you very much. And I wish us all that our audits will impact our governments, our public sectors, once again for the benefits of our people. And in those areas, the international collaboration between EUROSAI members is very important, because we are sharing the same risks, we are sharing the same challenges, and we can study from each other, both on data, both on audit plans, but also about findings and recommendation and other relevant ideas that we can share all together. So thank you very much.